The topic of our conversation today is spirituality, and more importantly, what is spirituality to you? What does the term spiritual mean? And of more importance, or of greater importance as well, is what's a spiritual community? Because that's apparently what we are. So I'm curious to get everybody's opinions and takes on that. And maybe we'll take it one question at a time and just start with the real basic question of what is spirituality? What does it mean to be spiritual? When we refer to something as spiritual, what does that mean to you? And so I will just open up the floor, and basically, if everybody could mute yourself, and then if you want to talk, just unmute and go ahead and share your truth with us.
I don't mind starting. I think spirituality, maybe at its core, is just to recognize that we're spiritual beings and that spirit infuses everything. And in fact, I think nothing is alive without spirit. So it's a animating, creative, generative. It's what everything is infused with. I'll start there.
The essence, if you will. Very nice.
I'll riff off that. So yeah, the word essence is something that really resonates for me. And as I finish up writing my thesis for ministerial studies this week, the thing that I'm researching right now the most is breath, specifically holotropic breath work. And so spirit as aliveness, as essence, as the not just animating factor, but like the foundation of everything, the activity, the interconnectivity, the animation, the activation, something that we are continually endeavoring to experience more fully, to embody more fully, to realize our innate wholeness. And so this right here is spirituality for me. This conversation, this connection, this just, like looking at all of these amazing faces. We can do this through technology that allows us to be in the same Zoom room, even though we may be sort of worlds apart, but in this same moment right here, right now. So everything so far, like I wrote down animating, creative, generative, and then essence. Really, really loved what Sherry offered. And just I'm looking forward to, the evolution of this conversation as everyone jumps in and offers what spirituality means to them. Thank you.
Thank you, Lassia. And interesting, if anybody's ever looked into the root word, like the history or the etymology of the word spirit comes from Latin spiritus, which is actually originally meaning breath. So very good sort of observation or comment on that, Lassia. Thank you.
I was listening to a podcast a couple of days ago of Daryl Anka, I think her name is, and he channels Bashar. And there's the 7 essential, I forget what he calls it, 7 essentials of life or something like that. And the first one is air. We can only live a few seconds without air. And so anyway, that goes along with the idea of breath. Perhaps that's what reifies our spirituality.
Thanks.
And I would think that the second one, or one of those 7, would be water. Because without water, there's no flow. Spirit can be such an enormous subject, because I agree with you, Sherry, that it makes up everything. It's the energy that makes up everything, and that without it, there is no life without it. Spirituality. What is spirituality? It's just recognizing, that essence, that core, the energy source with which not only animates all life but creates all life, and and allows us to even be able to differentiate different things that are really all part of the same thing. It's very abstract in that way. Yeah, that's my stab at it.
Thanks, Ray. Yeah, Shirley.
I was thinking of a definition of it, and I've been thinking of it all week, kind of thing. And what came to me was the inner knowingness of the connection to the divine.
That's a good one.
And and there's many things that like to be open to that connection to the divine and the synchronicities, and to be aware of those things and to appreciate them and to ask for more of those connections. And it's just like being connected to the spiritual world, because we are spiritual beings and we need that, we desire that, we crave that. And I think if we are aware of it and appreciate it and ask for more, then we are more connected to that spirituality, to that divine aspect of ourselves.
Yeah.
That's all I got.
Okay, I can tell you one thing. I looked at the Finnish English and English Finnish dictionaries. And one first thing that jumped, spiritual is anything but not physical. Nothing physical. Everything else is spiritual. And spiritual actually means behavior which is without blame, which is something that is fully accepting everything that's part of it. It's positive. And God, like, I mean, it looks to me like the church initially was kind of the guard of spirituality, but even the church has deviated from that. So it's no longer the church that takes care of spirituality, but each one individually. And without sin, though, I mean, you don't sin. Sinning is not spiritual. And right-minded was another word, which to me implies positivity and kind of wanting to be open to everything and everybody. Then appropriate, honorable. Just a minute. The excellence of honorable behavior. I mean, there's many words that came in that search that actually got a little mind-boggling, because I never thought about any of it this way. But I think the thing is that the spirituality has been forgotten in today's world very much, except for the groups like ours, who is searching specifically what can we do to live in a spiritual mind and do things right. Anyway, enough said for now.
Oh, that was very insightful and interesting, because I get a lot of the comments. I relate and I agree with what is being said. Spirituality is, in some sense, it's everything. It permeates everything. It's the essence of everything. But if we want to talk about it, we have to kind of, if it's everything, it's nothing, right? If it's everything, there's nothing to talk about. If it's everything, what does it mean to be a spiritual community? Well, it's just a community. So in order to give it some specificity, or to at least use it in a more specific way, to narrow it down, I feel like what you've done, Arno, is you've given it some specific attributes, along with others as well, obviously. But the fact that you bring in the fact that it has to do with non-blaming, for example, or openness, now we're getting into some specific attributes or some specific qualities, at least potentially, of spirituality. The other piece that you mentioned that I found very interesting is that you contrasted spiritual to material, as in spiritual is non-material in a way, which is something that I've toyed with as well. And I don't know if others have also had similar musings about spirituality as something that is non-material or somehow different from material, maybe the source of the material, which is what some of you have said, the essence of everything that is. So yeah, anyways, that was very interesting. Thank you for sharing.
Could I just follow up with that. Thank you, Arno, for looking up actual definitions. That was great, because it's really great to have a reference, a reference point. We're all sort of like conceptualizing, and this is sort of what it feels like, but then to have something that we can actually sort of have as a jumping off point and go from there is good too. And so this is exactly the kind of stuff that I have been immersed in for the last 7 years. This is like class for me. And so if I go to Thomas Troward, which is one of the authors that we studied, which was one of the biggest influences on Ernest Holmes and the science of mind, he would say that spirit is the polar opposite of matter, but that ultimately spirit is all there is, that even matter is just a denser form of spirit expressing in some way. And so that it depends, are you talking about it from a religious perspective, a metaphysical perspective, a quantum perspective, a philosophical perspective? There's so many different ways that you could interpret and just sort of, I guess, talk about, what is spirituality. And so it's great to have this conversation because the different perspectives are already coming up. I could talk more because, again, this is the kind of thing that I've been doing for 7 years, but I'll leave it at that, because I know there's a lot more that can be offered in this group. So I'm looking forward to hearing more.
Actually, can I say one thing? To me, it was the contrast between doing and being. Doing is non-spiritual. Being is the spirit part of it. So physical doing is not spiritual itself. That's kind of what I read from the definition, but I'm not sure how much we need to nitpick the exact meaning of the words, but I mean, get the general sense about, I look at what I've been doing, my career. The doing itself is not spiritual. The connections with people and everybody else who's involved and everything else, the nature involved, is spiritual.
Well, I don't know if I agree with that entirely, Arno. And one of the reasons that and this is why discussion is great, right?
Yeah.
Is in my very first year of practitioner studies, my favorite book, and to this day, it's my favorite book, is Care of the Soul by Thomas More. And one of the things in that book that I absolutely love and still hold dear today is finding the sacred in everything, even the most mundane of tasks or chores. And so to me, when I hear you talking about doing, part of what spirituality is finding that sacredness in something like hanging laundry or driving to work or doing bookkeeping or something that you don't enjoy, that doesn't necessarily nourish your soul, but that because we're always at choice, that we can choose to find the joy and value and meaning in something that otherwise seemingly might seem like just a task or a chore. Does that make sense? Like, we can bring the spirituality, we can find it, we can view the doing from a spiritual perspective. I think that's what I'm trying to say.
In a sense, I think in a strange way, at least from what I'm hearing, again, maybe I should have started with my favorite quote from the Tao Te Ching. The Tao that can be named is not the eternal Tao. Words are not the things that they point to. And so right now what we're falling into is semantics, because I think what you're saying, Lassia, and what you're saying, Arno, are very closely tied. Yeah. When your being is in the right place, everything that you do is spiritual, including loading the dishwasher, hanging laundry, helping a friend, having a conversation, or creating a safety plan for an offshore oil platform, because you're doing it from that place within yourself where you are not only in alignment with spirit, but you are aware that everything is spirit. And so it is at its core the being that makes the spirituality. But then once you find that place within yourself, as you're saying, Lassia, everything that you do becomes a spiritual task or a spiritual practice. And so the connection between being and doing, I think, is extremely important and a subject that we should definitely dive into more, because there's something there, in my opinion.
Yeah, I had to agree with thanks both Lassia and Olli. I must say, when I follow my own life, I've been a really, really good human doing. And you can say that spirituality has been built into it. But the way that I was spiritually set when I was doing all those good things wasn't good spirit. I was just based on logic, and that was the feeling of what we perhaps might mean by spirit was really mostly absent, which really restricted. It's who I am when I'm doing. That is the spiritual part of it, not what I'm doing. And how do I actually appear to the rest of the world and to myself?
Sherry,
Anyway.
did you have your hand up, my friend?
Well, I had both hands up for a second or two, saying I was also a human doing.
Oh, I see.
In fact, somebody that I worked with early in my career said, "Sherry, you're not a human being; you're a human doing," and it stung, but it was true. And anyway, it occurs to me, just listening to the last several minutes, that and riffing off what both Ollie and Alessia were saying, and I think maybe somebody else. But anyway, this notion of connection, as physical beings, I mean, as far as I can tell, we're separate, but what we're connected with is spirit. What we're connected in is spirit. And then anyway, how I'm seeing it so far, but life teaches me all kinds of lessons, and I see things differently from one year to the next or whatever. But it seems to me that, and I think, Lesia, you were pointing to this too, is like each, call it physical expression, is a kind of a soul expression of spirit. So we all have a different expression. And anyway, in nature, it's clear to me. In humans, it's not as clear, but in nature, it's super clear to me that, I'm looking at a honeysuckle bush, and honeysuckle does honeysuckle, and oak does oak, and so on, right? In nature, that there's no question. It's just when we get to the human level, we start questioning, well, I don't know, should I be more like an oak, or should I be, if I'm a cloud, should I let the wind push me around? I don't think I will today. Or, I mean, we have this capacity of mind that gets in the way of spirit, our experience of spirit. And so we can, in that human doingness, I think what we end up, we're just run by the mind's programming of what we should do and so on.
I had a
Spirit is having a harder time getting through. Sorry, go on, it's your turn now.
I had a spiritual experience this week, turning a doing into a spiritual experience. I stopped 2 lanes of traffic going both ways on the Souk Highway, stopped 2 lanes of traffic to cross the road to bring a baby fawn across the road back to his mom. He had walked across the road. He was like 4 days old. He had walked across the highway, and the next vehicle coming from the other side was a semi-truck. I mean, and he was making his way back that way, and I just, I stopped both lanes of traffic. There were 15 cars, 20 cars each way, stopped waiting for me to get this little guy across the road. And I dreamt about it that night. I had this when he looked into my eyes, like when I was guiding him, he turned around and he looked right at my face. And I just poured out all my love to him. And he just, went back down into the bushes where his mom must have been feeding, and left him there, because that's what they do. They leave their babies so they can go and eat. And this little guy decided to go looking for his mom, I guess. And, but that was a spiritual connection out of a doing. This is, I'm doing it. But when I'm doing it, I'm feeling like it is a spiritual thing. It's this connection between me and nature, connection between me and this little 4-day-old creature. So anyway, that's my take on doing and spirituality.
Wow. Thanks for sharing that, Linda. That's quite the experience.
Mhm.
Before we move on to other questions, I want to make sure we get Glenn and Barbara's perspectives on this very general, broad question. What is spirituality?
I can go next. I'm just going to be playful for a second. I don't have an answer or the answer, but the word to me. So I think we're talking about the world of non-duality, oneness, consciousness. So consciousness is the word I most associate with spirit, because it's, then I get to define what consciousness is for me, which is like trusting and love and divine, as Dre said. It's like everything is coming from this, right? But the word spirituality for me, I'm just letting these words flow over me as I'm listening. I hear it's split in the middle as spirit, duality. And the duality part is like when we describe things that are not alive, that we've assumed we're not alive, like rocks or air. So that, at one time we assumed that animals and plants and whatever didn't have any kind of feelings, so to speak. And so when Lassie and I were away in California, we were very blessed to be taken out on a boat going past one of those oil rigs that you just mentioned, Ollie, to see some pelicans. And on the way, we were just surrounded by dolphins. It was just pods and pods of dolphins just playing with the boat. And I was just thinking there about, at one time it was assumed, oh, they're just weird fish. They're not, what do they know? They're just fish. We'll eat them, So, and I'm getting more and more in tune with the idea that there is spirit in the trees and in the plants. So there's probably spirit consciousness vibrating at a certain frequency in rock, in things that don't appear to be alive, that you'd be as laughed at for saying, yeah, that's really alive. So I like that sort of sense of we get to decide where we draw the line there with what's alive and what isn't. But for me, it's just better to assume that it's all living and it's all aspects of this one thing, this consciousness ever expanding and new iterations in every moment pulsing out all the time. So that's where I am with it.
You, Glenn.
Mhm.
And Barbara, do you have anything that you'd like to share with us on this?
Well, I'm still learning quite a bit about spirituality. I'm investigating because of some bad experiences with the actual church, and think there is more out there, but just not to find it through the church. I need to find it a different way. So that's why I started this journey, and still learning lots.
Do you mind if I ask a follow-up question, Barbara?
Sure.
According to so in your experiences with organized religions, what was spirituality described or defined as?
A lot of my experiences with the church where I was younger. I wasn't an adult when I had my first concerns with the church. So I don't quite honestly remember talking about spirituality per se. It was a very narrow focus on what their personal agenda was. Again, remembering this as a young adult, so I really didn't see any connection between the being and what I was learning at this church. So I don't know if that helps or answers the question.
Absolutely, it does. Yeah, that's you. You answered as I kind of predicted, or as I assumed you would. My parents being Jehovah's Witnesses, their definition of spiritual is following all of their rules.
Yeah.
So, they don't really talk about spirituality and what it is. That's how they kind of define it, and that's the end of the conversation. So the fact that at your previous church experiences, spirituality wasn't really discussed or defined for you makes perfect sense, and it's in alignment with what I would have assumed with a sort of mainstream religion. So yeah, thank you for sharing that.
And maybe that's how we became human doings.
Yeah.
To do the right things, right? To be good enough for God or whatever.
Yeah, don't love those types of people, dress this way, don't have a beard. Like, they've got all these rules, the Jehovah's Witnesses, that make them spiritual. And to me, all their rules have to do with external, superficial, outward facing behaviors, which to me, like, I think, like, kind of what people are saying, spirituality has more to do with the essence and what's within than the external, which is kind of the outer manifestation of spirit. It's the, like, somebody else said, it's kind of like the densest, most sort of material form of spirit, right? So yeah, for me, the focus is always within, and what's the character of something, what's the essence of something. That's where the spirituality starts, at least, maybe not ends, but yeah. I wanted to ask about experience, because we're talking with words, we're talking about concepts and definitions. And Linda, you touched on something that I think is extremely important, which is a spiritual experience. And so maybe one way that we can get a little bit closer to the heart of this question is by defining, or not defining, by sharing or describing what is a spiritual experience. How does it feel? What does it feel subjectively from your perspective when you have a spiritual experience? And then perhaps we can kind of reverse engineer that a little bit to kind of arrive at some basic qualities of spirituality, and so on. So has anybody here had what they would call a spiritual experience? And if so, would you mind sharing what it felt like and what it was like from your perspective, subjectively, this experience?
I could speak to that to some degree, but just before I do, I wanted to make a comment about doing, because if there's too much do, you end up with, and all you do is do, you end up with do. Just saying. Just saying. So, that being said, I remember it was what I would call a peak experience, where I was sitting at my computer, and out my window to my left, I had a view of the Olympic mountain range. And I was going through a lot at the time, and I looked at my computer, and I looked at the mountain range, and something connected inside of me where I saw everything as the same thing. It didn't matter. Oh yeah, another part of it, when I was part of another spiritual center, and it was coming up to Christmas, and we always did a candle lighting, and I was going to represent the candle for Bartholomew, which represents imagination. And somehow, that being selected for that, looking at my computer, looking at the mount, all of a sudden I was just filled with joy and love. And I was so happy, I was crying. And it just, this peak connection, I just felt like I got it. Whatever it is, I got it. It's like I had that moment, and I cried, and it lasted maybe 15, 20 minutes, and then it sort of dissipated or stabilized, if you will. And it's like I wanted to stay there, couldn't maintain that. But it was just that connection. All of a sudden, it was like God touched me and just said, there you go. There's a taste. There's a drop. So that was a peak, very spiritual peak experience for me. and it changed. You know, it's like I've never forgotten it. And even in some of my darker periods that I've had in the last few years, you know, if I think about that, I just remember, yeah, you know, that was a reminder of I'm part of something so much bigger, so much bigger.
Thank you for sharing that, Dre. So connection was a big piece, feeling connected. And I like your expression of it. You got it. Now, could you tell us what it was so that we can all get it, Dre?
Yeah. Unfortunately, as soon as you start putting words around it, it's gone. You know, like you were talking about the Tao. If you could explain it, it's
It
not
ain't
it.
it.
You know, it was just that feeling of connection that my computer, the mountains, myself, is all the same thing. It was all the same thing. No hierarchy whatsoever. Same.
That ties in kind of nicely too with what Glenn was saying about, you know, we would typically regard a computer as something inanimate and lifeless, but in that experience, Dre, you saw that what was so-called, you know, lifeless was the same stuff as the mountains and your flesh and everything around you. Wow.
Which makes sense when you think of our periodic table and all of the elements that everything, absolutely everything, is made of, is really all come from stardust. Like, I love how Michael Singer talks about everything that was created from all the suns exploding and all of the larger bodies that had to grow over millennia, millions, billions of years, that it all became particles of elements, and these elements in the certain combination has made you, has made this computer, has made the thing, the painting behind me, and the walls, and the air. Even, you know, we talk about seeing each other as separate, whereas we don't count the fact that there's air that connects us directly, right? Whatever, that air or atmosphere or whatever, that's all part of stuff. That's all particles that we don't, brain that can't really comprehend the real connectedness that we all share.
Oh, Candace.
Candace.
She's
I-
making French toast. Sorry to interrupt.
Good. Well, Dre, when I listen to you, I can not say, but my heart is right there. And even in my speech, which I gave, I hinted a little bit that there's this John Shields who was a minister who left the religion because religion forget its spirit. And he became a leader of a men's group that I was part of. I had an event that is not same, but somewhat similar to what you just described. When we went on lead with this John Shields, about 15 people for a weekend to the nature. And that was the first time in my life that I understood that everything around us is the same. We are part of everything. We are not superiors to anything on everything around us. We are integral part of everything. Whatever we do, say it is part of it all. And the spirit, I'm not sure how to really separate the spirit from all of that, but it is just the wholeness of everything being okay, being there in the nature, being part of it, and realize that it all comes from the same place and it's all going to the same place. That's all for now.
And again, we're talking about the sort of the hallmarks of spiritual experience. So far, we're 3 for 3. Linda, Arno, and Dre. Connection seems to be a central part of it. Not making connections necessarily, but becoming aware of the connections that are already there.
Yeah.
To me, it was I've had a couple of really profound experiences, and each time I know I know I'm loved on a deep, deep level, an overwhelming level. Like it just comes like, I can't even describe it. I just know that I am loved, by the divine, by God, by whatever, my higher power, whatever I want to call it. I just know it, and it's like no other feeling I've ever had. It's just so different, and no predicting it either. One time I was I used to drive from Victoria to Calgary back and forth quite often. And this one time I was coming back from Calgary, and I was entering the lower mainland, and I was coming around a corner, and there were other cars with me, beside me, and it started pouring. It wasn't just a normal rain, it just like a downpour, and it even sounded like really eerie. And I just got all goosebumps, getting goosebumps again, and I felt so protected. Like I knew it was a really, really dangerous spot in the road coming around there, and it was so raining so hard I couldn't see where I was going, and it would just, and no one else could either. I mean, we were all together, and that's what it felt like. We were all together, and we're going to make it through this. We're going to make it through this. We're protected. We're going to, and it only lasted a few minutes till we got past that really deathly corner. It was a turning of a corner in the lower mainland, Mission or somewhere. I forget where it was, but it doesn't matter. So that was, one of my profound experiences. I just knew. It's just a knowing. It's a feeling, but it's a knowing as well. Just knowing I'm protected, I'm loved, I don't know, just part of it all.
Wow, thank you for sharing that beautiful illustration or allegory, even, right? Like you said, all of you were driving through it, and you that you were all in it together, and you were all going to make it through together. That's a good analogy for a spiritual community, maybe, I think.
Yeah.
Sherry, you've unmuted yourself. I was hoping you would share maybe some of your spiritual experiences, because I know you've had a few.
Numerous, countless. I think the one that I want to share because I think it's relevant for everybody is it was in 2015, and so I've taught people about the phenomenon of prayer since 1998, but maybe more particularly since 2000. And the core basis of prayer is the experience of connection. And so I've helped people experience connection zillions of times, or many, and then the experience, like you're saying, pointing to, and Dre, you too, Linda and Dre, is an experience of love, like that's kind of nameless. And so in 2015, the experience that I had in my morning prayer one day was, the words were love is round, but the experience was, whoa, like I was shown that love is round is the very design of our universe. It is who we are, it's what everything is. That's what we're designed in, what we're made of, it's what is. Anyway, so those experiences of belonging, of being loved, and we are love, right? I've come to see that is our nature. That is our essence. We are all love, and everything that is not that as an expression is just what still needs to be healed in order to be fully present as a loving essence, I guess. So And there's always more to learn. There's always more to heal. We've had centuries of programming that has us be more doers and look at the world as this concrete itness out there. So we've got a lot of undoing to get to our full nature of love. And maybe when we get to that, that's the end for us as a human. Maybe maybe we graduate to be angels or archai or something.
The omega point, as Pierre Chardin called it, right? The sort of culmination of all that's happening here and that's brought us to this moment.
Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful. Thanks for sharing. And I think, Glenn, your dolphin experience as well, I think it sounds like that would have been a spiritual experience as well on the boat, right? I mean, that sort of realization that you had.
Yeah. It certainly was. Okay, I'm going to use the word enlightening, meaning it lightened me on, like, it just raised me up and made me present, which is another word I think is important right now. Is I'm listening to people saying things like Dre. He became incredibly present to what is. That's the word that jumped out when he said what he experienced. And with the dolphins on the boat, and here it is, we're 5 people, our friends, piloting and coming back and forth to the front of the boat, and Milana, our daughter, we haven't seen in a while, from Toronto, and Alasia and I, and we're all taking turns, like, trying to guess where they're coming from to take a short video or picture. But really, then it was just like, no, just enjoy this. Just be now in this place and experience the playfulness of this, and the uncertainty is part of the joy as well. Like, are they going to be on this side or this side? And it was just, it just lightened me. It just made me, it stripped away things, I guess. It stripped away levels of, like, I need to control or, say how this is going to work out. It's just let it go. Just let it go.
Mm.
And so that was a recent one. Maybe Lassie could add to that, but it was, and this was on top of, like, an incredibly emotional few days at the center when Lassie was doing her talk and her contributions, and that also, like, with Milana and I in this group of people who are very loving and were opening up in ways, and that just, again, just stripped away sort of, like, nonsense that we think we need to hold on to, and it's like, no, actually, no, that's not who I am. So I'm looking at my wife right now.
Well, I like everything that you said. Yes. And I guess the one thing that really sort of comes up for me is especially since experiencing the call to ministry 7 years ago, is that for me, everything is a spiritual experience, because I really am founded in the concept that we are spiritual beings having a spiritual experience. So for me, when I hear Dre use the term peak experience, I think, ooh, yeah, or even a mystical experience that just cannot be explained or described with words because it just limits it. That's kind of what runs through my mind. And so I'm just appreciating everyone offering what they have experienced, and really appreciate that Glenn used the word present, or presence, because that was very much what was going on. It's sort of like we want to get a shot, and a video and whatever. But then even Milana, like our 18-year-old daughter, for her to say, you know what, I'm just going to put my phone down and I'm just going to be here. And it's like, that's it, just to be present, as fully present. And for me, like on Valentine's Day, I decided no TV till June, because I wanted to be as fully present as I possibly could be for the rest of my ministerial class experience. And TV was a huge distraction. Even if it was like an hour or two a night, it pulled me out of being present. And I'm like, why am I trying to pull myself out of this? What am I trying to, like, get away from or take a break from. Like, I signed up for this. And so to be present to everything, to everyone, to every feeling, to myself, to whatever is coming up, and in my meditations and in the spiritual mind treatment and the work with clients and the work on myself, and then having this extraordinary experience of just being so fully immersed in love and connection when we were in California, and I was going through my 3 15-hour days of paneling and workshops and talks and all the final stuff we had to do for ministerial studies. But to just have that love that I now know myself to just be activated again and again and again, that was extraordinary, just absolutely extraordinary. And there are no words that I can use to describe how expansive and monumental and epic and, peak, or like, it's not even otherworldly. It was being so fully present as who and what I am, and being surrounded by people who were the same way, just like here, with no, just like Glenn said, sort of stripped away and enlightened to just the beingness of who we are. So I endeavor every moment, to be as much of that as it can be. However, I also look forward to, like, those mystical, otherworldly, I don't even know how to explain this, I couldn't have scripted it if I tried, kind of experiences, of which I have had some, but really look forward to more, because that to me is just, that's like being in the quantum, of infinite potentiality that's always there. But it's like, what else can I experience? What else can I tap into, connect to, that is already there? How can I like move beyond the veil that doesn't even exist, kind of thing. So la 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 la, I could keep talking. Anyway, that's what I'll offer.
Well, thanks for sharing that. And I just want to make a quick note. So far, we've heard a handful of spiritual experiences, and none of them took place in a church. Isn't that strange? Isn't that strange, Barbara? So based on some of these descriptions, is there anybody here who maybe has had a spiritual experience and didn't realize it, and now they're listening to these conversations and they're going, oh, actually, maybe I have had spiritual experiences? Is anybody having one of those moments, maybe? Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you mind sharing with us what it was, how it was for you?
It's really quite basic. I find that I moved here from Ontario, and I found the hustle and bustle quite a bit here. I find with the nature, like if I'm driving on the Pat Bay Highway and you come over and you see the mountains and stuff, it just gives me pause. So I guess that's kind of realizing it, or walking in the forest or something. And I've also seen a wild dolphin from underwater, and my camera was set to the wrong settings. This was years ago, and yeah, I just put the camera down and watch. So mine seemed to be primarily with nature.
How about you, Shirley? Have you had any experiences that you would describe as spiritual, perhaps, and that you'd like to share with us?
I've had many experiences, and when Dre said the picture behind me, I thought, okay, that's the one I'll share, because I do have a picture behind me, and it's the one with the horse and the little girl in the red.
Yeah.
And that picture was it. My mom is in spirit, and when I go visit my mom in the seniors' home, that picture was on the wall in her hallway, and I would just stay, and I was mesmerized by it, because the horse has got so much strength, but yet here it's surrendering to the little girl, and the little girl think that she's in charge, and it's just that interaction between the two of them, like just the oneness, and like there's so much that you could see in that picture. And so then I had shoulder surgery. I was in a car accident, and I needed something to do. So I was looking online, and I was so happy that I found that picture as a paint by number. So I painted it. It's a paint by number, and I moved in here about 2 years ago, and my son and I were at the table, and having supper. And then all of a sudden that picture, it falls. And it's like, and the nails were still in the wall, and it didn't break, it didn't crack, the glass didn't crack or anything. And it was like, oh my God. And my son, he goes, that's grandma. And so it's like, yeah, it was her being present in the new home that I purchased, and she's here with me, and that spiritual connection is still there. And it's like a reassurance that she is with us still. And so, yeah, I think it was very, and I just, well, my son and I got goosebumps, and I just like that reassurance and that stomach feeling and that flutter in your stomach and that kind of thing, that you know that you are connected with them.
Yeah, and I think it was you, Shirley, at the start of this all who mentioned synchronicities, something that we haven't really talked about, but that sounds like a major synchronicity right there, hey?
Yeah.
We've joked about it before. What a coincidence. It's like there are no coincidences in this world.
Yeah.
So, how beautiful. Yes, Sherry, yes. You are muted, my friend.
Thank you. It seems to me that what you just said about synchronicity reminds me, or opens up for me the notion that there's, as Lecia was saying, that we're kind of everything's a spiritual moment, but then there's some that are more profound than others. And so, so synchronicities and things like that are one kind. And when I feel like an inspired moment, if I'm writing or just in my morning prayers and an idea comes in that I can include in my book or something, those are also spiritual experiences, right? And I love them. I'm so amazed. And then but anyway, one of the things that I learned, and I could say is true, I learned partly by being taught, but having had a number of experiences now where I've helped other people connect with, and my own experiences of connecting with different kinds of spirits. So a plant spirit, a rock spirit, an ocean, the sun, the elemental fire, that the kind of experience that we would have, like if fire or a sacred mountain has given me an experience, they can be much bigger or more profound or something than, a message from a plant, or not to discount the plant, but it seems that there's an energy difference, there's a quality difference, there's a magnitude difference perhaps in where the experience comes from. Like the sacred mountain that gave me Love Is Round, it was like, whoa. So anyway, I just wanted to say that anything from an insight or a synchronicity or a direct message, an experience of being connected and related with everything, or at least everything, in my case, not everything, but the area around me, for example, is another kind of experience. So, yeah. Anyway,
well, thanks for sharing that. Yeah, and I mean, definitely each experience is going to have a different quality and a different. I like the term that you use. That's the word that came to me when you were talking about it, is magnitude, right? So it's not necessarily that one is more valid or bigger or better than the other. There's just orders of magnitude to these, just like how everything is a spiritual experience, but there are some that have more, whatever you want to call it, right? So yeah, very good point. So we've been chatting for an hour, my friends, and I'm sure we could chat for 12 more. Probably just like one person could talk for 12 hours about this, and then we could all take turns. So, but I think this is a great starting place, and I think it opens up a lot of other interesting questions, a lot of other sort of follow-up topics. And so if this is an experience that you enjoyed, this just kind of free-flowing conversation, something that we can do again, something that I want to schedule maybe on a couple Saturdays as on the weeks where we don't have our gatherings, we could have these in person, online, whatever works best for people. Because again, I think that certain things came up, like if everything is spiritual and we're constantly connected, then what is it that obscures the connection? And why is it that sometimes the veil is ripped aside and we're like, there it is, or I got it, right? So what gets in the way of experiencing ourselves as we truly are would be one question. Relationship to the mind, relationship of consciousness, awareness, and spirituality. There's just so much that we could dive into. So if this is something that you enjoyed, please let me know, and we can schedule a nice discussion group on a Saturday when I get back, and we can start having some of these more often, because I think there's great value in having these and sharing these